what I would question is if you do have a second referendum, it doesn't really give any power to the Prime Minister to negotiate with the EU, right? Because it's all in the interest of the EU to give the UK a rubbish deal because they think that actually the second referendum would never make the UK leave. Would that be a fair criticism?
Well, can I just begin by calling you up on the term second referendum? We see this as something completely different to the vote that took place in 2016. This would be, for the first time, the public seeing the terms of Brexit as negotiated by the government, so the fully negotiated alternative to EU membership, and then being presented with that choice and being allowed to make a decision.
Right, but that's semantics.
In reality, it would actually be a third referendum. You know,
third or fourth. Would it delegitimize the Prime Minister negotiation power?
I really could not disagree with that argument more. I think, look, the Prime Minister and the government have made a complete hash of this, as we're seeing playing out over the Irish border question. They've failed to come up with any solution to this problem. It's turning into potentially a crisis, not only for the negotiations, but for the Conservative Party. I think that's why we're seeing a growing appetite in the public. You know, we're seeing an increasing level of support for a vote on the deal. And I think, you know, this is something that's going to build over the next 6 months. When the deal comes back in October, November, December, whenever we see it later this year, Parliament is going to be faced with a choice. Do they accept the deal or do they reject it? At the moment, I can't see there's any majority in Parliament for any form of Brexit, frankly. So the idea of putting it back to the people, especially when there's a huge appetite by that point, I think is going to become quite an attractive option.
I mean, if we look, David, and if we kind of take apart Theresa May's options. So on the customs union, she has, Eurosceptics that want a clean out. She has, I guess, Parliament that wants to kind of stay in. What's the easiest option so that also, if there were to be a referendum, whatever you want to call it, on the actual deal, she would get it through?
Well, what they're proposing at the moment is what they're calling a customs partnership. You know, the language of all this has been very important, whether it's the customs union, whether it's a customs union, a sort of new form of one, which is what Labour are proposing, and what the government come out with is saying we want a customs partnership. It's a really technical and quite a complicated thing that they've proposed. It includes collecting tariffs on behalf of the EU and then refunding companies where the goods are headed elsewhere. And a lot of people, including the European Union themselves, are saying it's magical thinking, it's impossible, it's far too complex. So that is the solution that they have at the moment in their minds. It's a kind of fudge, if you like, but relying a lot on technology to make it work. Sounds like this hasn't got any legs at the moment, so they need to come up with something else. But at the moment, there's no system like this anywhere in the world. So it's a very, very difficult square to circle. So we're going to have to wait and see. Are there going to be some more proposals out of Cabinet next week? Is there any way to bring these two sides together to keep everybody happy with the wording? Or does this problem just continue to fester until we get some sort of vote or something else happens? Of course, the DUP, with whom Mrs May holds power only on their whims, they are very pro leaving the customs union as well. So, we have to factor that in. She's leading a minority government. She doesn't have the sway to push through her agenda.
Francis Grove-Wright, do you believe if there's a referendum on the final deal and Theresa May can't push it through or doesn't get the support, do we need to go to elections?
If there's a referendum and
they say, actually, no, we don't like your deal with the EU, does it automatically mean that she's out of power?
There are all kinds of circumstances that we can envisage, and I don't think anyone really knows how any of this is going to play out. Whether, if Parliament rejects the deal, does that force the Prime Minister out if it goes to a referendum? What's the question on the ballot paper? We're not advocating a particular question. All we are saying is that at this stage, the negotiations are going badly. People are increasingly alive to the fact that the Brexit that is being delivered is not the one that was promised. We know that there's not going to be 350 million a week for the NHS. We know that trade agreements with the likes of Donald Trump are going to take years and potentially involve huge trade-offs and accepting things like chlorinated chicken. And as we get to the point at which the government is going to bring back the deal, should it be Parliament and politicians, or should it be the public that get to choose whether we accept the terms?
President, do you have hard data to suggest that actually people that's true, that there's a realization that they're not getting the Brexit they wanted? Because a lot of the things I'm reading is kind of actually the Remainers are Remainers and the pro-Brexit are pro-Brexit still today.
Well, I think you look at most polling at the moment, you're getting, around 2/3 of the population say they think the negotiations are going badly. They think we're likely to get a bad deal. I don't think there's a huge level of detailed forensic analysis of what's going on in the negotiations, but I think there's a feeling among many that the Brexit that is going to arrive on the table later this year is not going to be the one that was promised during the referendum.